What's up guys, Austin here. So today what I want to talk to you guys about, I've talked to you guys about this a lot in the past, but I think it's one of the most important things when it comes to trying to achieve some sort of fitness goal. Lately I've been writing blogs for the gym that I currently work at, and this is the first blog that I actually wrote. So I'm going to go through sort of the main points in that blog and then describe what exactly you can do to figure out how you can best achieve any sort of a fitness goal. So the title of this article is How Understanding Your TDEE Can Guarantee You Reach Your Fitness Goals. I've done videos on TDEE before, like I said, and that stands for Total Daily Energy Expenditure. It doesn't really matter what your fitness goal is. It could be to improve your body composition. It could be increasing athletic performance. Or if you just want to just feel better, you really need to understand what your TDEE is. There are a bunch of different ways that you can figure this out, and you can find calculators online. However, those are just going to estimate how many calories you burn every day, and it's not necessarily the most accurate way to go about things. And everybody has a slightly different genetic predisposition to how they use fuel when they consume it. Sometimes you have to use the scientific method and sort of tweak little things in your diet to really understand how your body is going to utilize the fuel that you give it. So the most difficult part of finding your total daily energy expenditure is really trying to figure out how active you are outside of your scheduled workout. So let's say you do 30 minutes of cardio. Every time you go in a workout, you're going to know that you're probably going to burn about 300 to 400 calories when you do that. But what about the rest of the time? What about when you're walking to and from your car? What about when you're walking around your house? When you're doing yard work? All those things. That's where you kind of have to get into that scientific method and tweaking your diet. A really important question that I want you to ask yourself is, why do our bodies burn the calories that it burns? And when you can really answer this question very eloquently, you are going to sort of figure out new pathways of thought that are going to help you develop goals and reach your goals at some point. There are three primary components when it comes to how many calories you burn every day. You have your basal metabolic rate, your calories burned through your activity. So that's, like I said, a workout as well as when you're moving around throughout the day. And there's also something called the thermic effect of food. I'm going to break all of these down right now. So first, let's talk about basal metabolic rate. If we just think about what the definition of metabolism is, we can sort of understand what basal metabolic rate is. Metabolism means the chemical processes that occur within a living organism in order to maintain life. The way that I like to think about BMR is it's the minimum number of calories you have to be consuming in order for your body to work the way that it's intended. When you consume and digest carbohydrates, fats, proteins, those end up generating cellular energy, and then that will allow organs to function at their most optimal level. Our bodies were built through evolution to have our best interest in mind. We want to keep ourselves alive, and everything is running in the background. A couple examples of that, skeletal muscle around the rib cage is going to contract on its own to expand our chest so we can breathe. The smooth muscle within our digestive tract is going to contract and relax to move the food along our digestive tract so it can be absorbed. And then the cardiac muscle, our heart, is always pumping constantly so we can get oxygen to certain areas of the body that need it. All of these processes require energy, and that's what your BMR is. Your BMR is constantly working in the background to allow those things to happen. When you look at these three components as percentages when it comes to your total daily energy expenditure, your basal metabolic rate is going to be the largest. Your BMR can be changed, and it's usually changed through an increase in muscle mass, and that's why you really need to be doing some form of resistance training. And that makes sense because as you increase the amount of muscle mass you have, there's more tissue, more mitochondria, more metabolic activity, so your BMR is going to increase. A lot of times people make the mistake of not considering their BMR when they're trying to lose fat. As you know, glucose is the primary source of energy in our bodies. We all know that. We've heard that a million times. Sometimes when people try to lose fat, they cut their calories down extremely, extremely low, even below their BMR, because people just don't think about their BMR. They say, I'm going to eat 1,200 calories a day and that's going to make me lose weight. Yeah, you're going to lose weight, but you're going to be losing muscle mass. When we eat below our BMR, our bodies are going to be able to fight to stay alive by pulling stored fat in our adipose tissue and also stored glucose in the muscle and the liver to, be used within the body to keep things going. The body can really only carry about 2,000 calories of stored glucose within the muscle and within the liver. And fat stores are pretty much infinite, because you would starve to death before your body would actually use all that stored fat. But you have to remember, the body always craves glucose, and that's why it's extremely important that you don't eat below your BMR. And this is due to something called gluconeogenesis. This process occurs in the kidneys and in the liver, and what basically occurs is your muscle mass is going to be broken down into smaller units called their amino acids. And then those free amino acids combine with glycerol as well as pyruvate. And that generates something called, as you know, glucose. When we starve our body from the calories that it needs to function just at its basic level, just if you were laying in bed all day, we're going to lose muscle mass. Those amino acids are going to be broken off. This means our BMR is going to decrease, right? Because we have less tissue. We have less metabolically active tissue working. So this is the absolute last thing that we want to do when we're trying to be healthier, because if we lower our BMR, then it's going to be much easier to overeat. Like, here's an example. So let's say somebody has a BMR of 2,000 when they're starting their fat loss journey, and then they only eat 1,200 calories a day. Over time, they're going to be losing weight. Sure, they might lose some fat, but they're going to be losing muscle mass as well. And then once they get down to, let's say, 200 pounds from 250 pounds, their BMR is going to be a lot lower, and they're going to have to eat a lot less in order to maintain that weight. Versus if they went into it in a different way, where they were losing fat while at least maintaining their muscle mass, possibly losing a little bit, but you can't cut so many calories out of your diet that you're going to be below your BMR. That's just absolutely the last thing that you should ever do. There's a couple ways that you can calculate your BMR. You can use the Mifflin formula. I'll put a link in the description below. That's the easiest way to do it. You're just going to need your height, your weight, your age, and your gender. And then you multiply by a factor, and that'll give you a rough estimate of your total daily energy expenditure. And it ranges from about 1 to 2. If your goal is obviously to lose fat, then you have to eat less calories than what that total daily energy expenditure tells you. And then if you want to gain weight, gain muscle, you have to eat slightly more than that. Another way you can get your BMR test is you can go into a facility. There's a lot of medical facilities that can actually measure the amount of carbon dioxide you are releasing as you just lay there, and then it'll tell you approximately what your BMR is. And depending on your level of muscle mass, you might actually have a higher or lower BMR than what that formula predicts. So the next component is your calories burned through activity, and it's pretty much dependent on locomotion. Locomotion just means moving your body from point A to point B. That's because as you contract your skeletal muscles, as you're moving, your heart rate is going to increase because there's a higher demand for oxygen at certain contracting muscles. So if you're walking from here over to your bedroom, your legs need to contract in order for you to get there, so oxygen is going to be needed. And your metabolism is going to be more active when you do that. So I want you to think about this. There are 168 hours in a week, and if you get 8 hours of sleep like you're supposed to, you have 112 hours to be active, 112 hours to do things. So let's say you exercise 5 days a week and you do it for an hour. That leaves you with 107 hours to be active outside of the gym and do your normal thing. So you really need to think about this right now. Think really hard. What are you doing during those other 107 hours? Are you sitting on your ass all the time? Are you walking to and from places? Like if you're at work, are you just sitting at your desk and not moving very much, only moving to go to the bathroom, only moving to go to lunch? Or are you getting up every 30, 40 minutes and walking for 5-10 minutes? This aspect of the total daily energy expenditure is where it gets really tricky, because two people can have the exact same height, weight, age, gender, body fat percentages, but they can have completely different total daily energy expenditures if their lives consist of different levels of locomotion. So if you look at somebody who's an accountant who sits on the computer all day versus somebody who works in construction, you're going to get a very different total daily energy expenditure. The only real way that I can figure out how to get around this sort of dilemma is purchasing some sort of fitness tracker that monitors your heart rate throughout the day. And there's really expensive versions of these. Like if you get a Garmin, it'll be a little more accurate, versus if you get something like a Fitbit, it'll be less accurate, but it'll be more affordable. So These things are always around your wrist. They're measuring your heart rate throughout the day, and it uses equations to be able to estimate how many calories you're burning based on the changes in your heart rate. So if a fitness tracker of some kind is outside of your budget, there's a way around figuring out how many calories you burn through activity, and you really have to consider your goal. So first, let's just do the easy one. Let's do the most common one, which is fat loss. What you would need to do if you want to figure out how many calories you're burning throughout the day based on your activity is you would need to first get that BMR calculator and then figure out your TDEE based on the factor that you're going to give it. So let's say you give it a factor of 1.55, which is moderately active. So then after you get that TDEE based on the calculation, you subtract 500 calories from it, and that's how many calories you should eat per day to expect some level of fat loss. And then you need to really stick to that number for a month at least. And then after that month, and after you're being active, you need to remeasure your body fat percentage and your overall weight loss. And if you're not losing any fat at all, like if your body fat percentage doesn't decrease, then you're eating too many calories. And if you're losing more than 2 pounds per week, you're eating far too little. You're eating underneath your BMR. So this last aspect of your total daily energy expenditure is the thermic effect of food. And remember, like I said, our bodies are always working to keep us alive. And digestion is one of the major things that has to happen in the background in order for us to be able to use the fuel that we give our bodies. So our digestive tract is going to require a lot of energy to digest, absorb, and store the food that we eat. So you can assume that when it comes to consuming carbohydrates and fats, your body is going to use about 5 to 10% of those calories to consume it, not to consume it, but to digest, absorb, and store all those things. So if you were to eat 1,000 calories of fat or carbohydrates, about 50 to 100 will be burned through digestion. Protein's a little different. Protein has a thermic effect of around 25%. So if you have 200 calories of chicken, about 50 calories are going to be used to digest that. So the calories burned or not burned from the thermic effect of food won't basically stop you from achieving your goal necessarily, but there are ways to understand why certain foods are better for you and more conducive to weight loss than other foods. So very simply put, the thermic effect of food can be slightly increased or decreased based on the types of food that you eat. And it really boils down to the complexity of the food. So if you look at carbohydrates, if you have a 12-ounce Coke, that's about 140 calories of just pure high fructose corn syrup, no micronutrients, nothing, no fiber, just 140 calories of sugar, you're going to have a very low thermic effect. It's going to be near that 5%. Those simple sugars are, first of all, they're in liquid form already, and they're just going to be immediately digested and used or stored depending on your activity level. But if you were going to eat something like 140 calories of sweet potatoes, that's a little different because you have long chains of starch, you have fiber, you have the complex carbohydrates that are going to require a lot more energy to break down and digest. It's going to take longer and it's going to require more energy. If you want to maximize the thermic effect of food, think of foods that are going to increase your metabolic rate to digest them. So complex carbohydrates, unsaturated fats, fiber, and protein, all of these things will contribute to a higher thermic effect of food. All right, so I hope that helped you improve your understanding of what goes into your total calorie burn every day. I'm just going to quickly summarize everything. So your BMR is going to be the minimum number of calories your body needs to stay alive, and it's the majority of the calories you burn every day. It's calculated through those equations that I mentioned, or you can directly calculate it through medical equipment. Never eat below this. Never, never, never. Additionally, the calories you burn through activity can be pretty difficult to measure directly if you don't wear a fitness tracker. So you can use the scientific method to figure out your activity level by determining if you are on the right path to achieving your goal. Like I said, you need to hypothesize basically every month depending on if you're losing weight or if you're gaining weight or if you're losing too much weight. And lastly, the thermic effect of food is a small effect, but you can increase the thermic effect by consuming foods that require more energy to digest, absorb, and store. All right, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you around. Hey, before you go, if you liked the video, click like below and also click subscribe. Let's be honest, if you've been on the internet for more than 2 minutes, you knew that this was coming. Also, if you're new to the channel, go check out some of my other videos and some of my other playlists, and also follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.